You know, with this one being Zack Snyder's first film, you can say it was the dawn of a new career. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel and a brand new review series. With the upcoming release of Army of the Dead, I'm first going to talk about all of Zack Snyder's films that I have yet to review on this channel, which are his first 5 movies, as I've covered all of his DC films earlier this year. I've especially wanted to do this as it's literally been a decade since I last saw any of the movies I'll be discussing over the next few weeks, and I wanted to see if the ones I liked especially held up at all. And then once I review Army of the Dead, I'll follow that with a ranking of all of Zack Snyder's films. So we're kicking things off with his debut, 2004's Dawn of the Dead. Let me know before we begin what your thoughts on Dawn of the Dead were in the comments below, and make sure to hit that thumbs up button as it helps me out immensely by getting my channel out there. And if you're new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with reviews of new releases, older films, hidden gems, and so much more on a near daily basis. But let's jump right into it and let's talk about Dawn of the Dead. This follows a nurse, a policeman, a young married couple, a salesman, and other survivors of a worldwide plague that is producing aggressive, flesh-eating zombies who take refuge in a mega Midwestern shopping mall. Just so you know, as I often do with my reviews of other older films, this will contain spoilers, as I do want to talk about things that happen later on in the film. So, if you haven't seen Dawn of the Dead and wish to know nothing, this is your spoiler warning. Go watch the movie, then come back to this. But anyway, here we go. Written by James Gunn, for those who aren't aware, this is a remake of the 1978 classic of the same name from George Romero, and this even contains a few cameos from some of the original stars towards the beginning of the film, giving interviews on TV before the power cuts out everywhere. Ken Foree plays a televangelist, Scott Reiniger plays a general, and Tom Savini plays a sheriff who makes it clear that the zombies need to be shot in the head in order to kill them. So when I first heard of this at the time of its release, I wasn't fully aware it was a remake until I saw it for the first time when it hit cable down the line, and I started looking into it. Funny thing is, the way I actually found out about this at all was because I remember reading how this and Shaun of the Dead, Edgar Wright's first film, were both released in the same year, only a few months apart, even though I didn't get to see either movie when they were actually out in theaters. But anyway, something you've probably heard me say before is that I'm not exactly a big fan of Zack Snyder in general. He's not someone I flat out dislike, otherwise I really wouldn't be doing the series, but his stylistic choices can be very hit and miss for me. Though I've always had a soft spot for this film, mainly because this was always the least Snyder-like of all of his movies. This contains none of the stylistic choices that Snyder is now widely known for, mainly the use of slow motion. We do see it briefly here and there, but it's not done in that same style as we'd see in films like 300, Sucker Punch, or his cut of the Justice League. And since Snyder mostly works as a director for hire, not having a hand in writing the screenplays, with some exceptions that we'll explore later, it would be strictly those stylistic choices that would make his films almost easy to distinguish when just glancing at them, and not anything done in the story itself. So if no one were to tell you ahead of time, and you just randomly turn this movie on, you'd probably have no idea this was a Zack Snyder movie. In fact, this looks like just about any other horror movie that we've seen in the early 2000s, especially due to the desaturated color palette that we'd see in a lot of films during this time period. Though that doesn't mean this is a derivative movie or anything. I don't mean that necessarily as a knock against this. I'm just saying it doesn't have the exact same look as his other movies, which was the one thing about this that always stuck with me for all these years and why I always liked it. Here, Snyder's less focused on cool visual tricks and more focused on taking a solid screenplay and making sure it's made to be as gripping and exciting as possible. And I'd say for the most part, he was pretty successful there. Now, while this focuses on a number of people, our main character is Anna, played by Sarah Polley, and we see the beginning of this zombie outbreak through her eyes. Now, this sequence isn't anything too new, as it shows Anna getting off work and going through the rest of her day like normal, and we're just waiting for something bad to happen. And sure enough, something bad does happen when a little girl in the neighborhood gets infected, breaks into her home, and kills her husband, which sends her off into the middle of this outbreak in a panic. But while the setup is nothing too out of the ordinary, Snyder's direction is pretty solid here, giving us this disorienting feel right off the bat as Anna tries speeding away from the outbreak, eventually crashing her car. And all in all, it was a good way of establishing who her character is a bit, as she's a nurse, which allows her to be really helpful to the other survivors at various points. And I'm glad we actually saw her at her job for a bit, instead of it just being a line she utters later on in the movie whenever it was convenient. So it was a pretty solid setup overall. The initial group of people she stumbles upon are Kenneth, played by Ving Rhames, Michael, played by Jake Weber, and married couple Luda and Andre, played by Ina Karapkina and Mekhi Phifer. And the group breaks into a mall together, which is the only real similarity this bears with the original Romero film, as even the zombies are different, whereas the original film had slower zombies, these are much faster. And while this isn't the only group of survivors, these are the ones we grow to like the most, and are the ones who probably have the most character development, which, for the record, is something people do like to see in zombie movies or shows. I mean, that was part of The Walking Dead's whole appeal. Because unlike, say, the Godzilla movies or the Mortal Kombat movies, zombie movies specifically revolve around the survival of people who aren't prepared for something like this to happen. And since they're not meant to be these super soldier-like characters who can just mow down hordes of zombies with ease, they're meant to feel real, so we need a reason to care about them, and I thought that was done fairly well here for what it was. We see Andre's a petty thief and Luda's pregnant, Michael's an electronics salesman, and Kenneth's a police sergeant. And while it's briefly mentioned Kenneth wants to find his brother, that's a storyline that's not exactly explored, and we instead focus on him building a friendship with a man stuck in the building across the street, as they share messages via whiteboard writing. And while this isn't a movie that strictly relies on its performances, I thought everyone here did a great job. Of the main cast, Weber gets the least to do, as his main thing besides giving directions is forming a romance with Anna, but he was still pretty solid, as was Sarah Polley. Ving Rhames was given the nicest balance between heartfelt moments and sequences of him just being a badass, as we get some laid-back moments of him talking to Andy, the man across the street, in between sequences of him going to town on some of these zombies. Mekhi Phifer, though, gets by far the film's most heartbreaking storyline, as Luda gets bit not too long after they enter the mall, and he's the only one who knows, and hopes to keep it a secret, especially with the baby on the way. And it's kind of unfortunate Pfeiffer's not as active as he once was, because this is a great example of how good he is. The group hits some initial tension when they get ambushed by 3 guards, who force them to give up their weapons. But things get heated as the leader of the guards, CJ, played by Michael Kelly, tries to take control, give orders, and threaten everyone with guns every second, seemingly establishing him to be the antagonist, at least outside of the zombies themselves. And that was one thing I thought this film set up very nicely, showing a lot of the tensions among the human characters, and for a while making that tension the focus of the film, and not necessarily the zombies themselves, who are used more sparingly at first. And Snyder does a great job of balancing out the dread of dealing with the zombies as well as the conflict of the humans facing off against each other in the mall, and it makes this film feel very fast-paced without coming off rushed, because there's always something going on. And part of what makes this so fascinating is seeing how different characters react to the pressure of this larger threat hanging over them. Some try to be quick on their feet, but still maintain some sort of order and take everyone else into consideration, but others are quick to resort to extreme measures if even the slightest thing's off, opting almost for an every man for himself approach. And those differing approaches come to a head a number of times in a few really well done sequences, especially as we do see some characters try not to crack under the pressure and go for that no-holds-barred approach. Despite all this going on, there's still some time to get little moments where we see characters bonding so that it allows us to connect with them without slowing the movie down altogether. As I said, mainly through the sequences with Ving Rhames, as well as some brief moments of romance among some of the survivors. There's really only one sequence that feels like a break. After CJ's incapacitated, we meet another group of survivors that includes Ty Burrell as this total jerk, being the total opposite of Phil Dunphy from Modern Family. And after a few heartbreaking sequences where we deal with the loss of a few characters who were initially with the other group, we get this montage where everyone's able to enjoy themselves in the mall, trying to relax and just have a brief moment of sanity. And it goes on just long enough that it allows both the characters and us to quickly catch our breath before jumping right back into things for the second half of the movie. And as for that second half, while I still enjoyed it, I don't think it's quite as strong as the first half, and it brought this movie down just slightly for me. The turning point comes when Andre's wife succumbs to her wounds before having the baby, and in this absolutely gut-wrenching sequence, one of the other survivors shoots her before she and Andre kill each other in a shootout, and then the other survivors arrive and just find this zombie baby, who they then have to shoot in what's easily the most jaw-dropping moment. But after this point, a lot of the character drama that was built up so well in that first half mostly gets tossed to the side, especially now that the best character was killed off. After this brutal moment, the group decides to try to escape the mall and head to an island nearby. And what we get is cool, it's just that the film devolves into nothing more than a straightforward action movie for the rest of the film. And of course, while you want your third act to be your high point, it's just the fact that there were still some tensions among the group that gets resolved a bit too quickly or just disregarded altogether in lieu of nonstop ass-kicking. Most notably, CJ, the character who was being built up to be the villain early on, just decides to go along with the rest of the group and gets along with everyone else as they make their escape. No reason whatsoever for the change, other than the script needing it to happen. They just forget the fact that he was threatening everyone early on and waving guns in their faces a little too quickly. And on top of that, to boot, towards the end, we get a psych-out moment where it seems like he's going to sacrifice himself after he shoots an explosive while surrounded by zombies, only to have him survive. And then have that happen again just a few minutes later in a much more scaled-down sequence where he actually does die. It was just a little anticlimactic in my view. Not just for the way he went out, but I really would have liked to see how the tensions with him and trying to escape the zombies really came to a head. That aside, I did have fun with this part of the movie. Like I said, it's pretty much scene after scene of really tense, exciting moments of our characters mowing down hordes of zombies, and it's awesome. Snyder shows here that he can stage action scenes really well. Like I said earlier, a big plus is you don't have to worry too much about his stylistic choices like the slow motion getting in the way here, and it keeps things moving right along, making for a solid, if flawed, second half of the film. As for the very end, you're either going to love it or hate it, as it ends with most of our characters escaping, besides Jake Weber, who gets bit, but then during the credits, we see they're met with more zombies when they arrive on the island, and their fates left unknown, though imply that they all possibly didn't make it. And I know not everyone may be a fan of that, especially as it looked like things were about to end on an optimistic note, only for the film to psych you out once more. Now, I think it's fine. In a way, it's appropriate, since with a zombie outbreak, it's not like just because you escaped one area infested with zombies, you're suddenly free and clear, because maybe the area you escaped to is worse than where you initially were, which is shown here. While it's unfortunate that there's a possibility no one makes it out of this, I think in a way, it makes for a pretty realistic ending to a really entertaining film. Dawn of the Dead is a solid debut for Zack Snyder. While it doesn't contain all of his stylistic choices that he's become known for, that actually works well here, as he's focused strictly on just making this as lively, gripping, and intense as possible, and for the most part, he succeeds there. While the first half is stronger due to its focus on character drama interwoven between zombie action, the second half's still fun, as it goes all out on our characters going up against the zombies. Filled with great performances and exciting moments of zombie action, this one's definitely worth watching. Dawn of the Dead gets a 7.5 out of 10. Good movie. Solid movie. Maybe not quite as good as I remembered it being all those years ago, but still very entertaining. I always considered it one of Zack Snyder's better movies, and while we only just started this review series, considering where we go from here, I have a good feeling it's still going to place pretty high on the ranking. But stay tuned, as up next will be my review of 300. But in the meantime, let me know, did you see Dawn of the Dead, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Did you like this more than the original, less than the original? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching everyone, and keep having fun with film.